"You're just a teacher, Olivia. You couldn't possibly understand how we conduct business in this family." These words hung in the air of Victor Harrington's mahogany-paneled dining room, his voice dripping with condescension as he swirled the amber scotch in his crystal tumbler. Across the table, I maintained a carefully neutral expression. The same professional mask I'd perfected during 4 years of marriage to his son and countless parent-teacher conferences with wealthy, entitled parents who believed their child's C+ was somehow my personal failing. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The Harrington Christmas Strategy Summit is a tradition that goes back 3 generations, my father-in-law continued, setting down his glass with precision on the hand-carved coaster. It's where the real decisions about Harrington Holdings are made for the coming year. "I understand," I replied calmly, cutting a piece of perfectly seared Wagyu beef on my plate. The knife scraped against the bone china with a sound that made my teeth ache. My husband James had excused himself to take a business call 15 minutes ago. His impeccable timing for disappearing during his father's little lectures never ceased to amaze me. The Harrington Mansion, nestled in Boston's most exclusive neighborhood, had never felt like home to me. Despite 4 years of marriage to the T, heir of Harrington Holdings, I remained an outsider, a public school teacher who had somehow entrapped their golden boy, if you believed the whispers at family gatherings. "All executives and their wives will be staying at the Vermont estate," Victoria, my mother-in-law, chimed in. Her voice maintained that perfect balance of politeness and dismissal she had mastered during decades as a corporate wife. "I'm sure you understand that with your background, the technical discussions would only bore you." Background. Her polite euphemism for my middle-class upbringing, my state university education, my chosen profession shaping young minds instead of corporate portfolios. I took a slow sip of water, resisting the urge to remind her that my background included a master's degree in education with honors, and that I'd been named Teacher of the Year in my district twice. "Of course," I responded, placing my silverware in the perfect position on my plate, something Victoria had corrected me on countless times during the early days of my relationship with James. "I completely understand." "James will be expected to attend naturally," Victor added. "The shareholders always look forward to his quarterly projections, and the Whitefields are especially eager to see him again." He exchanged a meaningful glance with Victoria. There it was, the real reason for this dinner. The Whitefields and their daughter Serena, who happened to be newly divorced, childless, and from a family with connections that even the Harringtons envied. How convenient. Through the French doors leading to the garden, I caught glimpses of James pacing back and forth, his silhouette moving in and out of the landscape lighting. He wasn't actually discussing quarterly projections or supply chain issues. I knew the signs by now. The casual stance, the too loud laugh. He was talking to Serena Whitefield, the woman he thought I knew nothing about. "Rebecca?" Victoria's sharp tone cut through my thoughts. "I apologize, Victoria, you were saying?" I returned my attention to my mother-in-law. "I was saying that you could use the holidays to catch up on your grading, or whatever it is teachers do during breaks." She dabbed her lips with her linen napkin, the diamond on her finger catching the light from the chandelier. "That sounds perfect," I agreed with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I've been meaning to update my curriculum anyway." From the garden, James's animated voice carried through the open window as he laughed at something, presumably something charming Serena had said. 4 years of marriage, and he couldn't, or wouldn't, stand between his parents and me for a single uncomfortable dinner conversation. "Mother, Olivia, sorry for stepping away." James breezed back into the dining room, slipping his phone into the pocket of his tailored slacks. His smile was firmly in place, the same smile that had once made my heart race when we'd met at that fundraising gala for the Boston Educational Foundation. Now, I just cataloged it as another performance. What did I miss? Nothing important, darling, Victoria replied before I could speak. Just discussing Christmas arrangements. Actually, I said, meeting James's eyes directly, your parents were just explaining that the Christmas Strategy Summit is family only this year. A flash of something, guilt, relief, crossed his face before he composed it into an expression of regret. Oh, well, you know how traditional these business retreats are, honey. It'll be boring strategy sessions and old men telling the same hunting stories. He didn't even try to argue for my inclusion, not that I'd expected him to. James always chose the path of least resistance when it came to his parents. It's fine, I said lightly. I've been meaning to visit my sister in Chicago anyway. This was a lie. My sister Megan and I had already arranged our annual January visit months ago, but it sounded better than admitting I'd be spending Christmas alone in our empty brownstone, in Boston's Back Bay, a home that Victor reminded me at every opportunity had been in the Harrington family for generations. How is Megan? James asked, clearly relieved by the change of subject. She's wonderful. Just made a partner at her law firm, actually. I couldn't keep the pride from my voice. Megan had fought her way up from a paralegal position, working twice as hard as everyone else because, like me, she hadn't had the advantages of an Ivy League education or family connections. How enterprising, Victoria commented with the faintest hint of surprise, as though it was shocking that someone from my background could achieve such a position. She always was the ambitious one, I replied, knowing how Victoria felt about ambitious women. In her world, a woman's job was to support her husband's career, manage the household with discreet efficiency, and produce suitable heirs. 3. Tasks at which I was apparently failing spectacularly. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9, its sonorous tones echoing through the mansion. On cue, James checked his watch with an exaggerated gesture. We should probably head out, Olivia. Early faculty meeting tomorrow, right? He stood, helping his mother from her chair with practiced gallantry. Yes, of course. I nodded, allowing him his graceful exit strategy, though I knew perfectly well my faculty meeting wasn't until the following week. Don't forget the shareholders' cocktail reception on Friday, Victoria reminded James as she patted his cheek. The Whitefields will be there, and they're so looking forward to seeing you. I'll be there, Mother, James nodded, then glanced at me. Olivia has that curriculum planning session, though. Another event I'd suddenly been uninvited to, apparently. I hadn't mentioned any curriculum planning to James. Such a shame, Victoria said, not looking at all disappointed. The Whitefields were asking about you both. The three of us moved through. The familiar choreography of departure. The air kisses, the empty promises to get together soon. The performance of familial warmth for the benefit of the housekeeper who appeared silently to see us out. As we walked to the car, James placed his hand at the small of my back. Once, that touch would have sent warmth spreading through me. Now it just felt like pressure, keeping me moving, keeping me in line. That wasn't so bad, was it? He asked, as we pulled away from his parents' estate, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of his Tesla. I didn't answer immediately, watching the security gates close behind us. The ornate wrought iron had always reminded me of a cage. Olivia? James prompted, his tone carrying the edge it always did when I didn't immediately smooth things over. It was fine. I turned to look out the passenger window, not trusting my expression to match my words. Same as always. What James didn't know, what none of the Harringtons knew, was that their perfect family narrative was about to unravel, completely. Because while they saw me as just a teacher, I had been doing some extracurricular work they couldn't possibly imagine. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The drive back to our brownstone passed in tense silence. James attempted small talk a few times. comments about the unusually cold weather, a question about one of my students he pretended to remember, but eventually gave up when my responses remained monosyllabic. By the time we pulled into our garage, he had retreated to the safety of his phone, thumbs tapping away at what he claimed was an urgent email to Singapore. I recognized the particular intensity of his focus, the slight smile he couldn't quite suppress. "Serena again. I need to finish this," he announced as we entered the house, already loosening his tie. "I'll be studying." "Take your time," I replied, hanging my coat in the closet. "I have some work to finish up as well." He looked relieved, already halfway down the hall. "Don't wait up." I watched him go, wondering when exactly we'd become these people, these strangers sharing a house, going through the motions of a marriage. Had it been gradual, or had we always been this way and I just hadn't wanted to see it? In our bedroom, separate from him for the past 8 months, ostensibly because of his early morning calls to international offices and my light sleeping, I kicked off my heels and unzipped my dress. The designer garment slid to the floor in a puddle of midnight blue silk, one of many such dresses hanging in my closet, all purchased to meet Victoria's exacting standards for a Harrington wife's appearance. I stepped into the ensuite bathroom, removing my makeup with methodical care, watching my face emerge from beneath the perfect mask I wore for Harrington dinners. Without the carefully applied cosmetics, I looked younger, more like the woman James had met 6 years ago, the idealistic young teacher who'd caught his eye at her first major fundraising gala in Boston. Back then, I'd been making a name for myself in educational circles, developing an innovative literacy program that had caught the attention of several prestigious private schools. I'd been confident, driven, unapologetically myself. James had said that was what attracted him, my passion for education, my unwillingness to be intimidated by his family name or fortune. "You're nothing like the women I usually meet," he'd said on our third date at a small jazz club near the harbor. "You don't care who my family is." I hadn't then. The Harringtons meant nothing to me, just another wealthy New England family with more history than relevance. I'd grown up in Ohio, raised by parents who worked in public service, my father a firefighter and my mother a librarian. The kind of entrenched privilege the Harringtons represented had been as foreign to me as the surface of Mars. I should have realized, of course, that what attracted James initially would eventually become the very thing his parents would try to eradicate in me. Passion for public education had no place in the Harrington family structure. Slipping into my comfortable pajamas, not the silk Victoria had given me last Christmas, I moved to the window seat overlooking the garden behind our brownstone. The moon illuminated the carefully landscaped flower beds, the stone pathways winding between century-old oak trees. Beautiful, perfect, and cold, like everything in the Harrington world. I pulled out my tablet from the bedside drawer, entering a long passcode that James would never guess. It wasn't that I was hiding anything illegal, just private. The one remaining piece of myself I hadn't surrendered to the Harrington assimilation process. The secure email account opened, showing 3 new messages. 2 from my financial advisor and 1 from my sister. I opened Megan's first. "All set for January. The paperwork came through. Call me when you can talk privately." Short and to the point. Typical Megan. I'd call her tomorrow from my car, the only place I was certain James couldn't overhear. The Harrington legacy didn't include respect for privacy. Next, I opened the messages from Michael, my financial advisor, and the only person besides Megan who knew what I'd been planning for the past 20 months. Transfer complete. Final documents. Ready for signature. Meeting confirmed for December 22nd. The second email contained attachments, financial statements, transfer confirmations, legal documents. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. While James thought I was grading papers and planning field trips, I'd been carefully orchestrating my exit. The irony wasn't lost on me. Victor and Victoria had always looked down on my teaching, career, suggesting repeatedly that a Harrington wife had no need for such concerns. "That's what husbands and family accountants are for, dear," Victoria had said shortly after our wedding. But my educational expertise, specifically my side research into educational technology companies, was exactly what had allowed me to see the truth about the Harrington fortune and about the very company that bore their name. 2 years ago, while organizing James's home office at his request, I'd come across documents that didn't make sense: property deeds, loan agreements, transfer. Records that didn't align with what I knew about Harrington Holdings. At first, I'd assumed it was just poor record-keeping, but something had nagged at me, so I dug deeper. Carefully, methodically, using research skills I'd honed over years in academia, I discovered something that changed everything: the Great Harrington fortune was largely built on intellectual property theft. Generations ago, when educational technologies were just emerging, Henry Harrington had stolen patents and innovations from smaller companies, using legal loopholes and financial pressure to force them out of business. This practice had continued through the decades, becoming more sophisticated, but no less unethical. What's more, I discovered that Harrington Holdings' latest flagship product, an AI-driven educational platform being sold to school districts nationwide, was based on stolen research from my own former colleague, Dr. Elena Patel. Elena had developed the core algorithm during our graduate work together, only to see her research mysteriously disappear after a meeting with Harrington Holdings representatives 3 years ago. The company James would someday inherit was built on the exploitation of educators, people like me, like Elena, who had devoted their lives to improving learning opportunities for children. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting patterns across the antique Persian rug. I'd been awake for hours reviewing documents and finalizing arrangements while James slept in his separate bedroom down the hall. His soft snores had stopped about 20 minutes ago, signaling he'd soon emerge perfectly groomed and oblivious, ready for another day of pretending to run the family business ethically. I closed my laptop as I heard his shower start. By the time he made his way downstairs, I was already in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand and another waiting for him on the counter. "You're up early," he observed, reaching for the coffee. He was wearing the charcoal gray suit I'd given him for his birthday last year, the one he'd said was exactly what I wanted, in that distracted tone that meant he hadn't really noticed or cared. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, not mentioning that his late-night phone conversation with Serena had been clearly audible through the wall. Our brownstone might be grand, but its 19th-century walls weren't soundproof. Little did he know that in less than a month everything would change, because I hadn't just discovered the Harringtons' unethical business practices, I'd quietly acquired the means to hold them accountable. "About last night," James began, stirring precisely 1 teaspoon of raw sugar into his coffee. "I think you misunderstood my parents." I bit back a sigh. Of course we were doing this now at 7:30 a.m. when he had exactly 15 minutes before he needed to leave for his first meeting. Just enough time to gaslight me, not enough for a real conversation. Did I? I kept my tone neutral, watching him over. "The rim of my mug. They value you, in their way," he said. "They're just protective of family traditions." Protective? I nodded as though this was a reasonable description of Victor and Victoria's behavior. "And these traditions require my absence. At Christmas." James checked his watch, the vintage Rolex that had been his grandfather's. "It's not personal, Olivia. The summit has always been about business strategy first. The spouses don't usually attend the working sessions." "Except for your Aunt Margaret," I pointed out. "And your cousin Philip's wife, Diane." He frowned slightly. "That's different. Margaret is on the board, and Diane works directly with our international clients. And I have a master's degree in educational technology and 6 years of experience developing learning systems," I countered. "But that's irrelevant because I'm just a teacher, right?" "You chose to stay in public education," he said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Nobody forced you to turn down those offers from private academies. No, nobody had forced me. Just strongly suggested, repeatedly, by both James and Victoria, with their comments about how working at elite private schools would create conflicts of interest with potential Harrington Holdings clients in the educational sector. They had worn me down until declining those opportunities seemed like the only way to save my marriage. "You're right," I said, surprising him. It was my choice. Just like what I was planning now was my choice. His expression softened, mistaking my agreement for capitulation. "I promise I'll make it up to you after the holidays. Maybe that weekend in Napa you've been wanting. A weekend that would inevitably be canceled due to some urgent Harrington business, just like our last 3 planned getaways. That would be nice." I glanced at the antique clock on the kitchen wall. "You'd better get going. Wasn't your meeting with Richardson at 8:30? He drained his coffee and set the cup in the sink, never in the dishwasher, because that was apparently my job, even though we had a housekeeper 3 times a week. "Don't forget, I have that alumni dinner tonight," he said, gathering his briefcase. "The one with the Harvard Business School group. I remember. Another event where a public school teacher's presence would be an embarrassment rather than an asset." I followed him to the front door, maintaining the fiction of our happy marriage all the way through his perfunctory goodbye kiss. As soon as his Tesla disappeared down the street, I dropped the act. The practiced smile fell away, replaced by focus and determination. I had 3 hours before I needed to meet with Michael to finalize the last of the arrangements, and a lot to accomplish first. First, I called Megan from the secure line in my home office, formerly the ladies' sitting room, when the brownstone had been built in 1897, and the only place in the house where I'd replaced all the electronics myself, ensuring nothing was connected to the Harrington family's shared cloud. "Accounts?" "Hey, sis," Megan answered on the second ring. "Secure line?" "Yes." I moved to the window, scanning the garden out of habit, but of course no one was there. The household staff wouldn't arrive until 10, and James was safely ensconced in his corner office downtown. "Everything's proceeding as planned," I told her. "Good. I've got the Chicago paperwork ready. The LLC is established, and the property transfers are set up. Just need your final signature on the closing documents. I'll be there on the 22nd, ostensibly to start my Christmas visit early," I said. Megan paused, and I could picture her sitting at her glass desk in her Chicago loft, brow furrowed in concern. "Are you sure about the timing? Christmas seems poetic," I supplied. "Fitting. The perfect bookend to last Christmas when Victor announced to the entire family that my continuing employment in public education was the greatest disappointment of his life." I was going to say emotionally complicated, but sure, let's go with the poetic. Megan's voice softened. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." I straightened a stack of papers on my desk, financial projections for Harrington Holdings that James had asked me to review when I had time. They confirmed what I already knew. The company was increasingly relying on stolen intellectual property to maintain its market position. Just ready for this to be over. And James still has no idea? None. I moved to my computer, pulling up the surveillance footage from the security system I'd installed when James started coming home with unexplained late nights. The cameras had captured plenty of evidence of his relationship with Serena. Enough to ensure that the fidelity clauses in our prenuptial agreement were thoroughly invalidated. "He still thinks I'm just the trophy wife who gave up her ambitions to support him," I added. "His loss," Megan said firmly. Literally, in this case. We finalized a few more details before ending the call. Megan, ever the pragmatic attorney, had helped me structure everything to be unassailable. The property acquisitions, the financial transfers, the new identity I'd established for my post-Harrington life. Not illegal, just private and very, very secure. After ending the call, I opened my closet and selected a Stella McCartney suit in deep burgundy, Victoria's least favorite color on me, which was precisely why I'd chosen it for today's meeting with Michael. Small rebellions had kept me sane these past years. The drive into downtown Boston gave me time to reflect on how I'd reached this point. 6 years ago, I'd been making a difference in education, developing innovative teaching methods that were changing how kids from all backgrounds learned to read. I'd met James at a fundraising gala where I was being honored for my literacy program. Handsome, charming, from a good family, as my mother would have said. Our whirlwind romance had seemed like something from a fairy tale. Weekend trips to the Berkshires, surprise gifts, candlelit dinners at restaurants with month-long waiting lists. When he'd proposed after just 6 months, I'd said yes without hesitation. The warning signs had been there, of course. His reluctance to introduce me to his parents until after we were engaged, the way he deferred to their opinion on everything, from our wedding venue to our honeymoon destination, his casual dismissal of my career as something I'd grow out of once we started a family. But I'd been in love and convinced I could handle Victor and Victoria Harrington. After all, I'd navigated the challenges of teaching in underfunded schools with limited resources. How difficult could one traditional New England family be? Monumentally difficult, as it turned out. From the moment we'd met, Victor and Victoria had made it their mission to remind me of my inadequacies, my background, not from old money, my education, State University, how quaint, my career, so modest for a Harrington wife, my fashion sense, too casual, my entertaining style, too informal, my childlessness, a personal failure, obviously. For the first 2 years, I'd tried. I'd hosted their approved dinner parties, joined their approved committees, redecorated our home to their approved standards. I'd even considered leaving teaching to focus on being the perfect Harrington wife, though I couldn't bring myself to actually do it. But nothing had been enough, and James, caught between his parents and his wife, had chosen the path of least resistance, placating both of us with half-promises and deflections, retreating further into his work, and eventually, into Serena's eager arms. I pulled into the private garage beneath Michael's office building, using the dedicated elevator that led directly to his suite. Michael Green had been my advisor since my early days in graduate school, one of the few senior professors who'd treated me as a protege rather than just another student. When I discovered the truth about the Harrington business practices, he was the only person outside my family I'd trusted with the information. Olivia, he stood as I entered his office, coming around his desk to greet me with a warm handshake. At 65, Michael radiated the calm confidence of a man who'd seen every financial trick in the book and was rarely surprised anymore. Right on time, as always. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I took the offered seat, setting my portfolio on my lap. I trust everything is in order? Completely, he returned to his chair, pulling up documents on his screen. The final transfer was recorded yesterday. Nexus Educational Technologies is now the official owner of record, and all the paperwork has been filed with the SEC. I nodded, a curious mix of emotions washing through me. Relief, anticipation, and an unexpected twinge of sadness. Not for the marriage I was leaving. That had been effectively over for years. But for the dreams I'd once had of what life with James might be. And there's no way to trace it back to me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We'd constructed the ownership chain meticulously, using a series of LLCs and trusts that would take a team of forensic accountants months to unravel. None. Michael smiled slightly. The irony is that we used the same corporate structure the Harringtons employed when they were trying to hide their acquisition of Elena's research. They created the blueprint we followed. Fitting. I opened my portfolio, removing the final documents I needed to sign. And the timing? Everything is set to trigger on December 24th at 9 a.m. Yes, Michael confirmed. The Harringtons will receive formal notification of the ownership change, along with the new licensing terms that would increase their technology usage fees by 400%. An impossible sum for a company that was already stretching its finances thin to maintain the appearance of prosperity. And James's personal accounts? I asked. Michael's expression turned more serious. As you predicted, he's been moving funds to offshore accounts for the past 3 months. Small amounts, trying to stay under reporting thresholds. If I had to guess, I'd say he's planning an exit of his own. I wasn't surprised. James's increased secretiveness, the documents he thought I hadn't noticed him removing from his study, all pointed to someone preparing to abandon ship, probably planning to disappear with Serena once his family's house of cards finally collapsed. Has he accessed our joint accounts? Tried and failed. Michael looked pleased with himself. The security protocols you put in place last year prevented the transfers he attempted last week. He likely assumes it's just a bank error. I nodded, signing the last of the documents with a steady hand. And the evidence of his infidelity? All properly documented? The prenup's fidelity clause is thoroughly triggered. Your separate assets are protected, and you're entitled to the settlement. Terms you negotiated. A settlement that included a substantial cash payment. Money the Harringtons would be forced to scramble for once their primary income stream was disrupted. Some might call it vindictive. I called it justice. Thank you, Michael. I handed him the signed papers, our fingers briefly touching in a gesture of solidarity. For everything. You were always my most brilliant student, Olivia. His eyes crinkled with genuine affection. The Harringtons never deserved you. I left his office, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time since discovering the truth about the Harrington business practices, I was taking active steps to free myself from their web of lies and manipulations. No more pretending, no more compromising, no more diminishing myself to fit into their narrow definition of wifely value. The rest of the day passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated normalcy. I approved the menu for a dinner party we'd never actually host, attended a faculty meeting at my school, and made an appearance at the women's volunteer luncheon where Victoria and her friends held court. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, playing the role of devoted Harrington wife one last time. That evening, James called to say he'd be working late again. The Richardson acquisition needs attention, he explained, his voice carrying that artificial note of regret I'd come to recognize. Don't wait up. Of course, I kept my tone neutral, neither accusing nor encouraging. Will you be home for breakfast? Probably not. Early meeting tomorrow. I understand. Good luck with the Richardsons. As I ended the call, I wondered if he was even trying to come up with believable lies anymore. The Richardson acquisition had been finalized 3 months ago. I'd seen the paperwork when I was organizing James's home office. Tonight, like many nights before, he'd be with Serena in her downtown apartment, thinking he was getting away with something. Let him enjoy these last few weeks of deception. Soon enough, his entire world would implode. I spent the evening finalizing details for my departure. My personal items, the ones that actually mattered to me, not the designer clothes and jewelry James and his parents had selected to make me a suitable Harrington wife, had already been quietly shipped to a storage facility in Chicago. My most important documents were secured in a safe deposit box under my maiden name. My exit strategy was flawless. Just after midnight, my secure phone chimed with a text from an unknown number, one of several burner phones I'd established for secure. Communications. Eagle has landed. Nest secure. Awaiting confirmation for December 22nd extraction. The message was from Natasha, the security specialist Megan had connected me with, a former FBI now running a private firm specializing in high-risk exits for wealthy clients leaving dangerous situations. Not that James had ever been physically abusive. His weapons were psychological, emotional, the slow erosion of self-worth rather than the bruising of flesh. I sent back a simple reply. Confirmed, standard protocol. Slipping the phone back into its hiding place inside a hollowed-out copy of Teaching in the Digital Age, the one book in our library James would never touch. I moved to the window. The Harrington brownstone sprawled before me, moonlight silvering, the ancient oaks and manicured gardens. Such a perfect facade, hiding so much rot beneath. 2 more weeks. That was all I needed to maintain this charade, to keep playing the role of Olivia Harrington, dutiful wife and failed addition to the family legacy. 2 more weeks until I reclaimed myself completely. My phone, my regular phone, buzzed with an incoming call. James. It was nearly 1 a.m. "Hello?" I answered, injecting a sleepy quality into my voice. "Olivia?" His voice was tight, controlled in that way it got when he was angry but trying not to show it. "Did you talk to the Richardsons?" I blinked in genuine confusion. The Richardsons? No, why would I? Because somehow they knew about the Meridian merger, information that was strictly confidential. Ah, the Meridian merger. The desperate attempt to maintain Harrington Holdings' market share by acquiring a smaller competitor that held patents to technologies they'd been illegally copying. I discovered the negotiations months ago when James carelessly left documents on his desk. I haven't spoken to the Richardsons in weeks, James. Not since the charity auction. Someone told them, and now Meridian is reconsidering the terms. The edge in his voice told me more than his words. Without the Meridian merger, Harrington Holdings would face potential patent infringement lawsuits that could expose their entire business model. Maybe it was someone at Meridian, I suggested mildly. These things rarely stay secret for long. It wasn't Meridian. His tone was accusatory. The Richardsons specifically mentioned that they heard it from someone close to the family. That means either my parents or you? I sat up straighter, his implied accusation hitting a nerve. And naturally, you assume it was me, not your father who's been friends with Robert Richardson for 30 years. My father understands what's at stake. Here. And I don't? I kept my voice even, though anger simmered just below the surface. James, I had no idea you were even meeting with the Richardsons tonight. You told me you were working late on the acquisition paperwork, not meeting them personally. A telling silence followed. He'd caught himself in his own lie. That's not the point, he finally said, backpedaling. The point is that Meridian is wavering, and if this merger falls through, the company will be in serious trouble. I understand the business consequences, James, I finished for him. I was an educational technology consultant, remember? Before I became just a Harrington wife. Don't start with that again, his sigh crackled through the phone connection. I'm under enough pressure without you turning this into another conversation about your career. I bit back my first response, which would have escalated the argument further. That wasn't in my playbook anymore. Every interaction now was carefully calculated, every reaction measured against my end goal. You're right, I said instead. This isn't about me. What does your legal team say about Meridian's hesitation? My sudden pivot to practical matters caught him off guard. They think we can salvage it. Up the offering price, maybe. I have another meeting with them tomorrow morning. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I offered the perfect supportive wife statement. Empty but reassuring. Yeah. He seemed deflated now, his anger giving way to the weight of his situation. Sorry for calling so late and for accusing me of sabotaging his company, for lying about his whereabouts, for the 1,000 small betrayals that had become our marriage. It's fine, I said, because that's what I always said. Get some rest. Things will look better in the morning. After we hung up, I lay back against my pillows, staring at the elaborate plasterwork ceiling. James's call had inadvertently confirmed what I'd suspected. The Harrington empire was crumbling, faster than even I had anticipated. The Meridian merger was their last hope, a desperate Hail Mary to maintain the illusion of prosperity, and it was apparently already in jeopardy. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't particularly proud of, wanted to enjoy watching them scramble. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the manipulations, tired of the Harrington obsession with appearances over substance. 2 more weeks, I reminded myself. 2 more weeks of playing along and then I'd be free. But first, I needed to ensure that my acquisition of Nexus Educational Technologies, and through it, the patents that were the foundation of Harrington Holdings' flagship products, remained a complete secret until the perfect moment. The Christmas Strategy Summit, where all the key Harrington decision-makers would be gathered in their Vermont retreat, far from the press and the public eye. Morning. Arrived with crystalline December clarity, sunlight refracting through frost-edged windows. James hadn't come home at all, not even to change clothes. Another piece of evidence for my growing file. I went through my morning routine with practiced efficiency, then headed downstairs to find Victoria sitting at our kitchen island, impeccably. Dressed in a Chanel suit, sipping from one of my grandmother's antique teacups. Victoria. I managed to mask my surprise, maintaining a neutral expression. I didn't realize you were coming by this morning. Clearly, her gaze swept over my silk pajamas and robe, perfectly respectable attire for a woman in her own home at 7:30 a.m., but apparently not up to Harrington standards for receiving unexpected mother-in-law visits. I would have dressed if I'd known you were coming, I said mildly, moving to the coffee maker. James didn't mention you'd be stopping by. James doesn't know I'm here. She set down her teacup with a delicate clink. This is between you and me, Olivia. A conversation between Victoria and me without James as a buffer. This was unprecedented in our 4-year history. I see. I poured my coffee, taking my time, refusing to show the unease her presence triggered. What can I help you with? You can explain why you've been meeting with Michael Green. The cup stilled halfway to my lips. How did she know about Michael? I'd been extraordinarily careful, using back entrances, secure communications, meeting during times when the Harrington sphere of influence should have been occupied elsewhere. I took a slow sip before responding, using the moment to compose my thoughts. Michael has been my financial advisor for years, Victoria, since before I met James. A fact you neglected to mention when you joined our family. I wasn't aware I needed to provide a complete list of my professional relationships. You do when those relationships intersect with family interests. Her lips thinned into a hard line. And how exactly does my financial advisor intersect with Harrington interests? I leaned against the counter, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. The kitchen suddenly seemed smaller, the air between us charged with unspoken accusations. Don't play naive, Olivia. It doesn't suit you. Victoria stood, smoothing her already immaculate skirt. Michael Green was investigated by the SEC for his role in an educational technology patent dispute 5 years ago. An investigation that found no wrongdoing on his part, I pointed out. No charges doesn't mean no wrongdoing. It just means he was careful. She moved closer, her perfume, always Hermes, enveloping me in its suffocating cloud of old money. What I want to know is what you're planning. Planning? I arched an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. I'm not planning anything, Victoria. Just managing my personal finances, which have nothing to do with Harrington interests. Everything a Harrington wife does reflects on the family, she countered, especially now when James is navigating sensitive business matters. The Meridian. Merger, I said, deciding to meet her head-on. If you're concerned about the merger, you should talk to James. I'm not involved in Harrington business decisions. A flash of something, surprise perhaps, or respect, crossed her features before she composed them into her usual mask of disapproval. So you know about Meridian. I'm married to the heir of Harrington Holdings. Of course I know about major business developments. And have you discussed these developments with Michael Green? The question was pointed, her gaze sharp. My conversations with Michael are about my personal portfolio, Victoria. Nothing more. This, at least, was technically true. We discussed the Harrington finances only in terms of how they would affect my exit strategy. She studied me for a long moment, as if trying to peer through my skin to the thoughts beneath. I've always known you were ambitious, Olivia. It's one of the qualities that made you unsuitable as a Harrington wife. But ambition can be dangerous when misdirected. Is that a threat? An observation. She retrieved her purse from the counter, a vintage Hermes Kelly in a shade of burgundy that exactly matched her lipstick. Family protects its own, Olivia. Remember that. The irony of her statement after years of making it clear I would never be family was almost enough to make me laugh. Almost. I'll keep that in mind. I remained in place as she moved toward the door. Anything else I should remember, Victoria? She paused, looking back over her shoulder with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. The Christmas retreat begins on the 22nd. I've arranged for James to arrive early for some private family discussions. You might want to adjust your schedule accordingly. With that parting shot, she was gone, the door closing behind her with barely a sound. I stood motionless in the kitchen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The 22nd, the exact day I was scheduled to leave for Chicago, the exact day Natasha was supposed to extract me from the Harrington web. Coincidence? Or had something in my careful planning been detected? I reached for my phone, my regular phone, not the secure one, and dialed James's office number. Harrington Holdings, James Harrington's office. His assistant answered smoothly. Susan, it's Olivia. Is James available? I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington. He's in meetings all morning. Can I have him return your call? Just let him know I need to confirm our schedules for the 22nd. His mother mentioned he might be leaving early for the retreat. Oh, Susan sounded surprised. I didn't have that on his calendar. Let me check with him and get back to you. So, Victoria hadn't discussed this with James yet. Interesting. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. After hanging up, I immediately moved to my secure phone, sending a coded message to Natasha. Potential timeline acceleration required. Stand by for details. Then I texted Megan. Call me. Secure line. Possible complication. 20 minutes later, I was in my car, driving toward the small coffee shop across town where I could speak freely without risking Harrington surveillance. The place was a hole in the wall that no self-respecting Harrington would ever enter, making it perfect for my purposes. Megan answered my secure call on the first ring. What's happening? Victoria came to the house this morning. She knows about Michael. Megan rarely cursed. The fact that she did now indicated how serious this was. How much does she know? Unclear. She made veiled references to my ambition and warned me that family protects its own. And she's trying to get James to the retreat early on the 22nd, the day we're supposed to leave. Megan was silent for a moment, and I could picture her rapid mental calculations. We need to move up the timeline. Agreed, but I need to be careful. If I change plans too suddenly, it might confirm whatever suspicions Victoria already has. What about the ownership transfer? Is it ready to trigger? Yes, everything's in place. It's just a matter of setting the date. Do it tomorrow, Megan said decisively. Better to move while they're still trying to figure out what you're planning, rather than waiting until they know. And my exit? I'll call Natasha. We can have you out by tomorrow night. The paperwork can be handled remotely. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 4 years of planning suddenly compressing into less than 48 hours. Okay, I'll contact Michael and set things in motion. Be careful, Liv. Megan's voice softened with concern. The Harringtons didn't get where they are by being stupid. If Victoria suspects something, she won't stop. Neither will I said with quiet determination. I've come too far. After ending the call, I sat in my car for several minutes, recalibrating my mental timeline. Everything I'd carefully arranged over years was now accelerated to a breakneck pace. The margin for error had just shrunk drastically. My phone buzzed, with a text from James. Mother mentioned Christmas retreat, not planning to leave early, working on the Meridian situation. Talk tonight. So Victoria had lied about James's early departure. A test, perhaps, or a ploy to disrupt whatever she thought I was planning. Either way, it confirmed my instinct to accelerate the plan. The Harringtons were circling, sensing a threat, but not yet able to identify it. I started my car and headed directly to Michael's office, taking a circuitous route and checking frequently for any sign of surveillance. Paranoid, perhaps, but the Harringtons had resources and connections throughout Boston. Better safe than sorry. Michael was surprised to see me without an appointment, but ushered me into his private office immediately. "We need to move up the timeline," I said without preamble. "Victoria knows we're meeting." His eyebrows shot up. "How?" "Unknown, but she came to the house this morning to warn me about my ambition and remind me that family protects its own." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Typical Harrington intimidation tactics. Michael moved to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. "How soon do you want to trigger the ownership transfer?" "Tomorrow." He paused, looking up at me. "That's aggressive. The notification letters are prepared for the 24th. The legal team will need to. Can it be done or not, Michael?" I cut in, my voice sharper than intended. "It can be done," he assured me. "But you need to be prepared for immediate fallout. Once the Harringtons receive notification of the ownership change, they'll mobilize every resource they have. Legal challenges, personal attacks, possibly even attempts to freeze your assets. Let them try." I pulled out my secure phone, sending another coded message to Natasha. "Confirmation for accelerated timeline. Tomorrow night." Michael's tone made me look up. His expression was grave. "Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Once we trigger the transfer, there's no turning back. The Harringtons will never forgive what they'll see as betrayal." I thought about Victoria's cold dismissal of me over 4 years, James's gradual abandonment as he retreated into work, and Serena's arms, the systematic dismantling of my confidence, my career, my sense of self. I met Michael's eyes steadily. "I'm not betraying them, Michael. I'm just beating them to the punch." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll set everything in motion. The transfer will execute at 9:01 a.m. tomorrow. Notification will be delivered to Harrington Holdings and to the family residences simultaneously. And my accounts? Already secured. The moment the transfer executes, your personal funds will be moved to the new accounts we established, untraceable and completely separate from anything connected to the Harringtons." "Thank you, Michael." I stood, suddenly feeling the weight of years of planning, of pretending, of waiting for this moment, for everything to finally come to fruition, for everything. "Just be careful for the next 24 hours, he warned. "Don't give them any reason to suspect what's coming." I left Michael's office through the private elevator, emerged into the parking garage, and sat in my car for several minutes, focusing on my breathing. After 4 years of careful planning, of methodically assembling the pieces of my escape while maintaining the perfect facade of a Harrington wife, the endgame was finally here. One more day of pretending. One more day of being Olivia Harrington. The disappointment, the outsider, the woman who would never truly be family. Then I would show them exactly who I really was. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed midnight, its sonorous tones echoing through the empty house. I sat in James's study, a room I rarely entered when he was home, methodically going through his files one last time. Not to gather evidence. I already had everything I needed. This was about making sure I hadn't missed anything that might come back to haunt me. My phone buzzed with a text from Natasha. "Extraction confirmed. 10 p.m. tomorrow. Standard protocol." I sent back a simple acknowledgement, then returned to my task. The Meridian merger documents were spread before me, revealing the desperate measures the Harringtons were taking to save their sinking corporate ship. The terms were heavily weighted in Meridian's favor. They were essentially acquiring Harrington Holdings' intellectual property for pennies on the dollar, while allowing the Harrington name to remain on the letterhead as a face-saving gesture. No. Wonder James was stressed. This wasn't a merger. It was a surrender disguised as a strategic partnership. I took photos of the key pages, encrypting them to my secure cloud storage. Not because I planned to use them. I had no interest in corporate espionage, but because knowledge was protection. If the Harringtons came after me, I wanted every possible shield. The front door opened and closed, followed by the familiar sound of footsteps in the hallway. James wasn't supposed to be home tonight. Another late meeting had been the excuse. Yet, here he was at midnight, and from the uneven cadence of his steps, he'd been drinking. I quickly restored the files to their original order and shut down my tablet. By the time the study door opened, I was sitting calmly in his leather chair, a single desk lamp illuminating the room. Olivia? James stood in the doorway, his tie askew, confusion evident on his face. What are you doing here? Waiting for you. I kept my voice neutral, studying him. His normally impeccable appearance was distinctly rumpled, and there was a smudge of lipstick on his collar. Not even trying to hide it anymore. I thought you had a late meeting. It finished early. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. Why are you waiting in my study? We need to talk about Christmas. I stood, smoothing my silk robe. And about what your mother said this morning. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. My mother? What did she say? She came by the house. Didn't she tell you? No, he frowned, moving further into the room and dropping his briefcase on the desk. What did she want? To warn me, apparently, about my ambition being misdirected. James's expression shifted to weariness, replacing confusion. What does that mean? You tell me, James. I moved around the desk, maintaining a careful distance between us. She seems to think I'm some kind of threat to the family. She's just protective. You know how she gets. Protective of what, exactly? The family name? The family secrets? I paused, watching his reaction closely. The family finances? His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. Just trying to understand why your mother felt the need to deliver cryptic warnings about family loyalty while you're supposedly working late on the Meridian merger. How do you know about Meridian? His voice had taken on an edge. You mentioned it last night, remember? When you called to accuse me of leaking information to the Richardsons. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Right. I was under a lot of pressure. Clearly. I nodded toward the lipstick stain on his collar. Is that what they're calling it these days? Pressure? James's hand went to his collar, his expression cycling through surprise, guilt, and finally settling on defensiveness. It's not what you think. It never is. I moved toward the door, suddenly tired of the charade. Go to bed, James. We both know you're going to sleep in the guest room anyway. Olivia. He reached for my arm, but I sidestepped his grasp. Save? It. I paused at the doorway, looking back at him. This man I'd once loved enough to uproot my life for. Whatever story you're about to tell, I don't want to hear it. Not tonight. I left him standing there, surrounded by the trappings of Harrington prestige, the antique desk that had belonged to his great-grandfather, the oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, the shelves of leather-bound books that I doubted he'd ever read. All symbols of a legacy that was crumbling beneath the weight of its own pretensions. In my bedroom, I locked the door, something I'd started doing months ago when James's late-night returns sometimes included attempts at drunken reconciliation. Tonight especially, I needed the barrier between us. Tomorrow, everything would change, and I couldn't risk a moment of weakness, of nostalgia for what might have been. I pulled out my secure phone, checking for updates from Megan and Natasha. Everything was proceeding according to the accelerated timeline. By this time tomorrow night, I'd be on a private plane to Chicago, leaving the Harrington name and all its associated burdens behind. Sleep eluded me as I ran through mental checklists. anticipating potential complications, reviewing contingency plans. So much could still go wrong. The Harringtons had resources, connections, and influence. Once they realized what was happening, they would marshal everything at their disposal to counter me. But I had the advantage of surprise and of knowing exactly how the Harrington empire was structured, all its weaknesses, its pressure points, its carefully hidden vulnerabilities. Dawn was breaking when I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains I'd never liked but had installed because Victoria insisted they were appropriate for a Harrington residence. The alarm woke me at 7 a.m. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, selecting a conservative Donna Karan suit in navy, the perfect Harrington wife attire for a Wednesday in December. Nothing that would signal today was different from any other day. Downstairs, I was surprised to find James in the kitchen, already dressed for work and making coffee. This deviation from our normal routine, where he typically slept late after his late meetings, put me immediately on alert. "You're up early," I observed, keeping my tone casual as I reached for a mug. Couldn't sleep. He didn't see my eyes, focusing instead on stirring his coffee with unnecessary attention. "About last night?" "It's fine," I cut him off, not wanting to navigate another round of excuses and half-apologies. "We both said things we didn't mean." He looked up, relief evident in his expression. "So we're okay?" "We're fine." I checked my watch, 8:15 a.m., 45 minutes until the ownership transfer executed. "Don't you have that meeting with Meridian today?" "It's been pushed to this afternoon." He took a sip of his coffee, studying me over the rim of his mug. "Mother wants to see us for lunch, both of us." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Today? I have appointments." She was very insistent. James's tone carried that note of finality it always did when relaying Victoria's demands. "She says it's important. Family business." Family business. The Harrington code for something too sensitive to discuss over the phone. "What time?" I asked, already calculating how to adjust my exit strategy. 12:30, at her house. That would put us at Victoria's Beacon Hill mansion, right when the notification letters were scheduled to be delivered. Not ideal, but perhaps useful. I could witness their reactions firsthand. "I'll move some things around," I conceded, turning away to hide the tension I couldn't quite mask. "But I can't stay long. I have a faculty meeting at 2. Another lie, but one that provided a plausible excuse to leave Victoria's house before the situation escalated too far. "Thank you." James's relief was palpable. "Mother will appreciate it." I doubted Victoria had ever genuinely appreciated anything I'd done, but I simply nodded, focusing on preparing my own coffee. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Probably not. The Meridian situation is complicated. I understand." I checked my watch. Again, 8:25 a.m. "I should get going. I need to stop by the school before I reschedule my other appointments." The school, my refuge, the one place in my life where I was valued for my mind rather than my ability to play the perfect Harrington wife. After today, I would never have to choose between my career and someone else's expectations again. "Right?" He nodded, clearly not remembering that it was winter break and the school was closed. "I should get to the office." I waited until I heard his car pull away before moving into action, sending rapid-fire texts to Natasha and Megan on my secure phone, updating them on the change in plans. "Lunch at Victoria's house at 12:30. We'll proceed with 10 p.m. extraction as planned, secure all documents and prepare for potential escalation." Megan's response was immediate. "Be careful. If they suspect anything, get out immediately. Natasha will be on standby all day." I spent the next 30 minutes making final preparations, checking that my essential documents were secure in my hidden safe, confirming my travel arrangements for that evening, ensuring the small overnight bag I'd prepared was concealed in the trunk of my car beneath a pile of teaching materials. At precisely 9 a.m., my secure phone buzzed with Michael's message. Transfer executed, notifications dispatched, account secured. It was done. Nexus Educational Technologies, my anonymously owned company established through a complex web of LLCs and offshore entities, now legally owns all the patents that were the foundation of Harrington Holdings' flagship products. By the time the Harringtons realized what had happened, I would be beyond their reach, and they would be facing both the imminent collapse of their company and the loss of their family legacy. I took a deep breath, a curious mix of vindication and sadness washing over me. Not sadness for what I'd done. They had earned this reckoning through years of manipulation and cruelty, but for the dreams I'd once had, the life I'd imagined building with James before I understood the true nature of the Harrington world. My phone rang, my regular phone this time. Victoria, earlier than I'd expected. Olivia? Her voice was tight, controlled in that way that signaled barely suppressed fury. You need to come to my house immediately, not at 12:30, now. Victoria, I have appointments this morning that I can't cancel them. The command was delivered with cold authority. This is a family emergency. What's happened? Is James all right? James is fine. Her tone suggested he was anything but fine. This is about you, Olivia, about what you've done. My pulse jumped, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I think you are. The chill in her voice could have frozen the Atlantic. You have 30 minutes to get here. Or I'm calling our attorneys. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, heart pounding. They knew. Somehow, they had discovered my plan before the notification letters had even been delivered. But how? I'd been so careful, so meticulous in covering my tracks. I texted Natasha immediately. Compromised. Emiel knows. Moving to extraction immediately. Her response was swift. En route. 20 minutes to your location. Standard extraction protocol. No time for the carefully planned evening departure. I needed to leave now, before the full weight of Harrington retaliation came crashing down. I moved through the house quickly, grabbing my secure laptop, my document portfolio, and the small case of personal jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother, the only pieces that held genuine sentimental value among the designer baubles James had given me over the years. As I reached the garage, my phone rang again. James this time. I hesitated, then answered, keeping my voice calm. James, I was just about to call you. Your mother said there's some kind of emergency. Where are you? His voice was tightly controlled, a dangerous undercurrent I'd rarely heard from him. At home. I'm just leaving to meet you and your mother. Don't bother. The cold fury in his tone was unmistakable now. We've seen the documents, Olivia. We know what you've done. What documents? I asked, playing for time as I placed my belongings in the trunk of my car next to the overnight bag. The patent transfer. The notification just arrived at the firm. His voice rose. How could you do this? After everything my family has done for you. Done for me? The absurdity of that statement almost made me laugh. What had the Harringtons ever done for me except try to erase who I was, belittle my accomplishments, and treat me as an unwelcome intruder? I think we both know this marriage has been over for a long time, James. I kept my tone controlled, professional. I'm just making it official. By stealing our company's intellectual property, the veneer of civility was cracking now, revealing the raw rage beneath. By threatening everything the Harrington name stands for? Your company's intellectual property? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice now. You mean the patents your family stole from Elena Patel and dozens of other educators? The algorithms your grandfather appropriated from researchers who couldn't afford to fight back? That intellectual property? Silence. Then, how did you— I'm a teacher, James. An educator. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my own colleagues' research appeared in your company's products? Did you really think I wouldn't investigate when the tutoring algorithm we developed in graduate school suddenly showed up in SmartLearn Pro with a Harrington copyright? You had no right to look into our private business matters. His voice had turned cold, calculating. Good luck with that argument in court. I started my car, the engine purring to life. The patent transfer is completely legal. Your family built Harrington Holdings on stolen intellectual property. I just helped return it to its rightful sector, education. With what money? He demanded. Where did you get the funds for something like this? You're a public school teacher. You make $60,000 a year. Did you really think I liquidated all my investments when I married you? That I just handed over my financial independence along with my career aspirations? I pulled out of the garage, checking the rearview mirror for any sign of Natasha's vehicle. I've been planning this for a long time, James. Ever since I found out about Elena's research. And about Serena. Another stunned silence. How did you know about your affair? The same way I knew about the others before her. I pay attention. Something you and your parents never bothered to do with me. This isn't over, Olivia, he said, his voice hardening with the entitled certainty of a man who had never faced consequences for his actions. You won't get away with this. The Harringtons protect their own. That's the thing, James, I replied, watching Natasha's sleek black SUV turn into the driveway as I reached the end of it. I was never one of your own. Your mother made that perfectly clear from day one. You're just a teacher, Olivia. Remember? Olivia? Goodbye, James. I ended the call, slipping my phone into my purse as Natasha approached. Tall, athletic, with the alert eyes of someone who had spent years in law enforcement. Her professional demeanor was reassuring in its calm efficiency. Mrs. Harrington, she confirmed, her expression betraying nothing. We need to move quickly. My team reports activity at your mother-in-law's estate, suggesting private security mobilization. Of course, Victoria would call in reinforcements. The Harringtons wouldn't handle this embarrassment through normal legal channels if they could help it. I'm ready. I gestured to my car. I'll follow you to the airfield. She shook her head. Too risky. Leave your vehicle. We'll use mine. Security. Protocols. I hesitated only briefly, glancing back at the brownstone that had been my prison for 4 years. Everything that mattered was already in my trunk. The rest, the designer clothes, the Harrington heirlooms, the trappings of a life that had never truly been mine, could stay behind. Let it go, I said, helping Natasha transfer my essential bags to her vehicle. We were pulling away from the property when a familiar Mercedes turned sharply into the driveway, Victoria, arriving far sooner than I'd anticipated. Our vehicles passed each other at the gate, and for one electric moment, her eyes locked with mine through the tinted windows of Natasha's SUV. I couldn't be certain she recognized me, but the way her face hardened suggested she had. We've been made, Natasha said calmly, accelerating smoothly as we hit the main road. Plan B activated. She pressed a button on her steering wheel, and a voice responded through the vehicle's communication system. Confirmed. Diversion team. Deployed. Private airfield access secured. Natasha caught my questioning glance in the rearview mirror. Precautionary measures. Your mother-in-law has already contacted her security team. They'll be looking for your vehicle and commercial flight. Bookings under your name. How do you know that? A slight smile touched her lips. We have ears in several security firms in Boston. Standard procedure for high-profile extractions. I sat back, a strange calm settling over me now that events were in motion. After years of planning, of maintaining the perfect Harrington wife facade while meticulously building my escape route, the actual moment of departure felt almost anticlimactic. Your sister is standing by in Chicago, Natasha continued, taking a series of turns that seemed designed to identify any potential tail. Michael Green has executed the remaining financial transfers. All accounts are secure. And the patent notification? I asked. Confirmed at 9:17 a.m. Harrington Holdings, your mother-in-law's residence, and the family attorney's office all received the documentation simultaneously. Natasha checked her mirrors before merging onto a less-traveled road heading away from the city. The notification to the current occupants of the brownstone, that would be you and your husband, was scheduled for 10 a.m. delivery. I checked my watch, 9:43 a.m. The courier would arrive to find no one home, a small disappointment. I'd hoped to be there when James received official notification that his family no longer owned the intellectual property that was the foundation of their company. But witnessing Victoria's reaction at the gate had been satisfying enough. My phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from James, from Victoria, from numbers I didn't recognize but guessed were Harrington attorneys. I silenced it and placed it in my purse. That chapter of my life was closed. How long is the airfield? I asked, watching the Boston cityscape recede in the side mirror. 28 minutes under normal conditions? We're taking an alternate route, so approximately 40. Natasha's driving was precise, professional. Your chartered flight is being prepared. Wheels Up is scheduled for 11 a.m. Less than 2 hours. From now, I would be airborne, leaving Massachusetts and the Harrington legacy behind forever. The thought should have been exhilarating, but instead, I felt a curious emptiness. Not regret exactly, but a hollow acknowledgement of 4 years, spent in an emotional wasteland, pretending to be someone I wasn't for a family that had never wanted me. They'll try to stop the flight, I said, thinking aloud. The Harringtons have connections at all the major airports. We're not using a major airport, Natasha replied. The private airfield is owned by a client of ours. No Harrington influence. There, I nodded, trusting her expertise but still scanning the road behind us for any sign of pursuit. The Harringtons weren't accustomed to losing, especially not to someone they considered an outsider, an interloper in their rarefied world. My secure phone buzzed. Megan checking in. Status update? I typed quickly. Extraction in progress. ETA Chicago, 2:30 p.m. Your time. Be aware. Patent transfer notification delivered. Full reaction protocol activated. Her response was swift. All systems go on this. End. Legal team standing by. Security perimeter established at safe house. Call when airborne. Your sister has been very thorough, Natasha observed, clearly having been briefed on Megan's preparations. The safe house location is secure, and your new identity documentation is ready. New identity, the final phase of my exit strategy. Not because I'd done anything illegal, but because I knew the Harringtons would use every resource at their disposal to track me down, to inflict whatever retribution they could for the perceived betrayal of their family. Olivia Harrington died the moment she signed those patent transfer documents, I said quietly. Time for Catherine Walsh to begin her life. Natasha nodded, understanding the reference to my new legal identity, established over months through entirely legitimate channels. A complete paper trail built through an LLC registered in Illinois, with connections to educational consulting work I'd genuinely performed during weekend workshops. Catherine Walsh, educational consultant, she confirmed. New tax ID, new professional, credentials, new credit history. Clean break. The countryside was opening up around us now, the rolling hills of Massachusetts stretching toward the horizon. I rolled down my window slightly, letting the December air flow across my face, carrying away the last vestiges of Olivia Harrington's carefully constructed persona. Private airfield ahead, Natasha announced, turning onto a narrow access road, partially concealed by pine trees. Final approach protocol initiated. She pressed another button on her console, and the vehicle's communication system activated again. Approach confirmed. Runway secure. No unauthorized personnel detected. The airfield came into view, a simple facility with a single runway, a few hangars, and a sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac, its engines already running. No commercial traffic, no TSA checkpoints, no manifests that could be traced through conventional channels. Natasha pulled up to a small security gate, exchanged a few words with the guard, and then proceeded directly to the waiting aircraft. A flight attendant stood at the bottom of the stairs, her professional smile revealing nothing about the unusual circumstances of this departure. "Ms. Walsh," she greeted me as Natasha opened my door. "We're ready for boarding whenever you are. Your luggage will be loaded immediately." Catherine Walsh. My new name is already in use. My new life began with this flight. "Thank you." I turned to Natasha, extending my hand. "I appreciate your assistance." "Just doing my job, ma'am." She shook my hand firmly. "Your sister has my contact information if you need anything further." I nodded, then climbed the stairs into the aircraft, not looking back at Massachusetts, at the life I was leaving behind. The flight attendant showed me to my seat, a leather chair far more comfortable than the first-class accommodations I'd grown accustomed to as a Harrington wife. "We'll be taking off shortly," she informed me. "The captain estimates a flight time of approximately 2 hours to Chicago. Can I get you anything before departure?" "Just water, thank you." I settled into my seat, watching through the window as Natasha supervised the loading of my few essential bags. My secure phone buzzed again. Michael, this time. "Harrington attorneys attempted an emergency injunction with Judge Harrison. Unlikely to succeed given clean patent transfer. All accounts are secure. Good luck, Olivia." I smiled slightly at his use of my soon-to-be former name. Michael had been one of the few people in my life who had seen me, really seen me, for who I was, not who the Harringtons had tried to shape me into being. "Thank you for everything, Michael," I texted back. "Catherine sends her regards." Cabin door closed, and the flight attendant announced our imminent departure. I fastened my seatbelt, closed my eyes, and focused on my breathing as the aircraft began to move. The past 4 years scrolled through my mind like scenes from someone else's life. The whirlwind courtship with James, the lavish wedding orchestrated entirely by Victoria, the gradual erosion of my identity as I tried to fit into the Harrington mold, the discovery of James's infidelity, the moment I found the documents that revealed Elena's stolen research, and finally, the catalyst, Victoria's Christmas dinner last year, her voice carrying clearly across the table as she informed the assembled family that my continuing to teach underprivileged children was the greatest disappointment in James's otherwise distinguished life. The moment when I'd realized that no matter what I did, no matter how perfectly I played the role of Harrington wife, I would never be accepted. That night, I'd begun planning in earnest. Not just an exit from my marriage, but a complete dismantling of the facade the Harringtons had maintained for decades. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, pressing me back into my seat as we lifted, into the clear December sky. Below, Massachusetts receded, the landscape shrinking to a patchwork of fields and forests, the Harrington world becoming smaller with each passing second, until it was nothing but a memory. "Ms. Walsh?" The flight attendant appeared with a bottle of water and a leather folio. "The captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. You're free to move about the cabin. Also, this was left for you." I accepted the folio, waiting until she was gone before opening it. Inside was a single document confirming that the patent transfer had been officially recorded with the U.S. Patent Office. The core intellectual property that had powered Harrington Holdings' educational technology products for the past decade now legally belonged to Nexus Educational Technologies, my company. Along with the document was a handwritten note from Megan. "Welcome back to yourself. KW has a bright future ahead." I leaned back, a sense of completion washing over me. The Harringtons had spent 4 years telling me I was just a teacher who couldn't possibly understand their sophisticated business world. Now, in ironic justice, they would spend years dealing with the consequences of underestimating an educator's understanding of intellectual property rights. The aircraft banked gently westward, away from Boston, away from the past, toward Chicago, and the future I'd carefully constructed for myself. Catherine Walsh's future, The Harrington Christmas Strategy. Summit was in chaos. I didn't witness it firsthand, of course, but Megan's contacts provided detailed reports that she relayed to me in the secure comfort of her Chicago penthouse in the days following my departure. Judge Harrison had indeed issued an emergency injunction at Victoria's request, but it had been quickly overturned when my attorneys presented the clean chain of patents' provenance, proving the legal transfer of intellectual property. The Harringtons hadn't created the algorithms they'd been profiting from for years. They had appropriated them from researchers like Elena, and now legitimate ownership had been restored. The Meridian merger had collapsed spectacularly when news of the patent transfer leaked to the financial press. A family unable to maintain ownership of its core intellectual property didn't inspire confidence in potential business partners. Harrington Holdings stock had plummeted, triggering margin calls on loans James and several senior executives had taken out using their shares as collateral. "They're liquidating assets," Megan reported 3 days after my arrival in Chicago, scrolling through updates on her tablet as we sat in her living room, Lake Michigan visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victor's art collection, James's vintage car portfolio, the vacation properties on Martha's Vineyard and Aspen. "And the company?" I asked, sipping herbal tea from a mug that hadn't been selected by Victoria Harrington for its appropriate pedigree. "Still operating, but scrambling to meet the new licensing terms." She looked up, a hint of concern in her expression. "Are you sure you want to go through with this part? The licensing fees are crippling them." I set down my mug, considering her question. "This isn't about punishment, Megan. It's about accountability. For too long, the Harringtons have used their name, their supposed prestige, to insulate themselves from the consequences of their actions. They've built their fortune on the theft of intellectual property from educators who couldn't fight back." "So what happens next?" Megan asked. "Once they've paid what they owe?" "Nexus will use the licensing revenue to establish a foundation providing grants to educational researchers, the very people Harrington Holdings has been exploiting for decades. The company can continue to use the technology they've built their products around, but now they'll pay fair market value for it, and the proceeds will benefit education, not just the Harrington family coffers." Megan's eyebrows rose. "You're not keeping the patent revenue for yourself?" "Catherine Walsh doesn't need to profit from Harrington misfortune," I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "She has other plans for her future." Those plans were already taking shape. Using my educational expertise, skills that had lain dormant but not disappeared during my years as a Harrington wife, I'd established a consulting firm specializing in helping schools integrate technology ethically and effectively. The Catherine Walsh Foundation would provide grants and educational resources to teachers developing innovative learning solutions, offering pathways for their work to reach students without being exploited by corporate interests. "Speaking of plans," Megan said, setting aside her tablet. "Michael sent over the final divorce papers. James has been served, but he's refusing to sign." "He'll sign." I felt oddly detached from the legal dismantling of my marriage. The emotional severing had happened long ago. Once he realizes the prenuptial agreement is invalidated by his infidelity and that fighting me will only expose more Harrington secrets to public scrutiny. "And Victoria? Any direct communication?" I shook my head. "Not with me, but apparently she's been quite vocal among her social circle about her gold-digging daughter-in-law's betrayal." "Classy as ever," Megan muttered. "It doesn't matter." I stood, moving to the window to watch the sunset painting Lake Michigan in shades of gold and crimson. "Victoria Harrington has no power over Catherine Walsh." My secure phone buzzed with an incoming message, an update from my legal team in Boston. I scanned it quickly, then handed the phone to Megan. "It's happening faster than we thought," I said as she read the message. "James signed the divorce papers. Uncontested, all terms accepted." "That's surprising." Megan looked up from the phone. "What changed?" According to his attorney's note, he wants to put this unfortunate chapter behind him and focus on rebuilding the Harrington legacy. I couldn't keep the irony from my voice. Translation: he's cutting his losses. The family's in too much. Financial trouble to fight a legal battle they know they'll lose. So it's over? Megan asked. Just like that? Was it over? The marriage, yes. The legal entanglements soon. But the echo of those years, the systematic diminishment, the casual cruelty, the gradual erosion of self-worth, those would take longer to fade. Not completely, I acknowledged, but I'm ready for whatever comes next. What came next, as it turned out, was an unexpected email from James, arriving on Christmas Eve, the day the Harrington Family Strategy Summit would normally have been in full swing, with its ritualized exclusion of those deemed not real family members. I hesitated before opening it, wondering if it contained more recriminations, more accusations, more attempts to make me feel guilty for the consequences of their own actions. Instead, I found something entirely unexpected. The email from James was brief but surprisingly frank. Olivia, by the time you read this, the divorce will be finalized. I won't pretend to understand why you've done what you've done, but perhaps I deserve it. I wasn't the husband you deserved, and you weren't the wife my parents wanted. We were, both trapped in roles that didn't fit. I don't know where you are, and I won't try to find out. Mother is devastated naturally, but she'll survive. The Harringtons always do, even if our circumstances are reduced for the foreseeable future. I thought you should know there will be a press release Monday. We're announcing a complete restructuring of Harrington Holdings. Father is stepping down as CEO, and I've declined the position. The board is bringing in outside leadership, someone with actual expertise in educational technology, rather than just a family name. The company will continue under the licensing agreement with Nexus. Your company, I assume, though I can't prove. We've negotiated reduced fees in exchange for establishing an ethics oversight committee composed of actual educators who will review all future products. Elena Patel has agreed to chair it. You won, Olivia. You completely outplayed us. I want to hate you for it, but I can't. The truth is, you've forced us to become a better company, one that might actually deserve to work in the education sector. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that despite everything, I did love you in my way. Not well enough, obviously. Not the way you deserved. Goodbye, Olivia. I hope you find what you're looking for. James. I stared at the screen, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling through me. This was not the bitter, vindictive response I'd expected from James. This was growth, acceptance, something I hadn't witnessed in him during our entire marriage. Elena chairing the ethics committee was an unexpected development, one I hadn't orchestrated. Had James reached out to her independently? Had he finally recognized the damage his family had done by stealing her work? I closed the email, set my phone down on Megan's granite countertop, and walked to the window. Snow was falling now, fat flakes drifting past the glass to join the growing blanket covering Chicago, clean, fresh snow erasing the landscape and creating something new in its place. Bad news? Megan asked from the kitchen doorway, a mug of coffee in her hand. Not bad exactly. I turned to face her. Just unexpected. I summarized James's message, watching her expression shift from concern to surprise to something harder to define. How do you feel about that? She asked when I finished. It was the right question, the one I was asking myself. How did I feel? Relieved, I said, the truth of it settling into me as I spoke the word. They'll have their precious Harrington. Name preserved. Catherine Walsh will have her fresh start, and Elena will finally get the recognition she deserves for her work. It's fair. Megan studied me for a moment, then nodded, accepting my answer. So, what's next for Catherine Walsh? First, a proper Christmas, I smiled, feeling lighter somehow. No Harrington formalities, no Victoria judging my gift wrapping skills, no pretense, just family. Real family. I can manage that, Megan grinned. I even bought a pathetically small tree for your apartment since you insisted on not staying. Here. My apartment, a sleek, modern space in downtown Chicago that couldn't have been more different from the Harrington brownstone, was part of my fresh start. Megan had offered to let me stay with her indefinitely, but I'd needed my own space, my own sanctuary untouched by the past. And after Christmas? She prompted. The foundation launches in January. I have meetings set up with potential partners next week. I picked up my phone, dismissing James's email with a swipe. And I'm considering going back to school, maybe a PhD in educational technology. I've always wanted to teach at the university level. Professor Walsh? Megan nodded approvingly. It suits you. It did, didn't it? The idea had been percolating for weeks, a dream I'd set aside when I became Olivia Harrington, but which Catherine Walsh could pursue without constraint. I think I'll apply for fall admission, I said, surprised by the excitement I felt at the prospect. It had been a long time since I'd looked forward to anything with genuine anticipation. Christmas Day passed in a blur of activity, the first normal, relaxed holiday I'd experienced in years. Megan and I exchanged simple gifts, ordered Chinese food, and watched classic movies in our pajamas. No formal dinner, no designer outfits, no anxiety about saying or doing the wrong thing. Just comfort and genuine connection. Meanwhile, updates from Boston painted a picture of the Harrington Empire in disarray. The family home on Beacon Hill was being prepared for sale. Victor and Victoria had relocated to a much smaller property in the suburbs. Harrington Holdings was undergoing a complete reorganization under interim leadership. I followed these developments with detached interest, like watching the final scenes of a movie I'd already walked out of. The Harringtons' downfall wasn't my focus anymore. Building Catherine Walsh's future was. Spring arrived in Chicago with a riot of color and crystalline blue skies. The Catherine Walsh Foundation had successfully launched, attracting favorable press and a roster of impressive board members. My consulting business established a solid client base, specializing in helping schools implement technology ethically and effectively. My PhD application was accepted at Northwestern with a generous research stipend. I had settled into my new life with surprising ease, the painful memories of my years as a Harrington wife gradually losing their sharp edges. The divorce was long finalized, the financial settlements completed, the legal battles resolved mostly in my favor. And then, just as the last of the winter chill was fading from Lake Michigan, my assistant forwarded an unusual request to my business. Email, Ms. Walsh, a Victoria Harrington, is requesting a meeting. She claims it's regarding an educational matter, not personal. I'd normally decline, but she mentioned Elena Patel referred her to you specifically. How would you like me to respond? I stared at the message on my tablet, a chill running through me despite the warm spring day. Victoria Harrington. The woman who had spent 4 years systematically undermining my confidence, dismissing my career, and reminding me I would never truly be family. How had she found me? Catherine Walsh had no public connection to Olivia Harrington. My identity. Change had been meticulously executed, my tracks carefully covered. Elena. She must have made the connection somehow and shared it with Victoria. But why would she do that, after everything the Harringtons had done to her? And more importantly, what could Victoria possibly want from me now? The divorce was settled, the company restructured, the patents were legally transferred. There was nothing left to fight over, no leverage she could possibly gain. I texted Megan immediately. Victoria Harrington requesting a meeting, claims Elena referred to her. Thoughts? Her response came within minutes. Trap? Power play? or genuine need? Hard to tell with that woman. If you do it, public place, I'm there too. She was right to be cautious. Victoria Harrington wasn't accustomed to losing, and she might see this as an opportunity to reassert some control over the situation, or over me. I called Elena directly, needing to understand her role in this unexpected development. "Catherine," she answered warmly. We'd reconnected after my departure from Boston, and she'd been one of the first to join the Foundation's advisory board. "How are things in Chicago?" "Unexpected," I replied. "Victoria Harrington is trying to contact me. She says you referred to her." A pause, then a sigh. "I did. I'm sorry I didn't warn you first. It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it for me." I kept my voice level, though my pulse had quickened. "Why would you connect Victoria Harrington with Catherine Walsh?" "Because she asked me to help her find you," Elena said simply. "And because I think you should hear what she has to say." "Which is what, exactly?" "That's for her to explain. But Catherine, it's not what you think. She's different now. The whole family is. What you did, exposing the patent theft, forcing accountability, it changed things. At least give her a chance to speak." I ended the call with a promise to think about it, but no commitment to actually meet with Victoria. Despite Elena's reassurances, the idea of facing my former mother-in-law again sent waves of anxiety through me. I'd worked so hard to build this new life, to become Catherine Walsh fully and completely. Was I really willing to risk reopening old wounds? The answer came to me as I stood on my balcony that evening, watching the sunset paint Lake Michigan in hues of orange and gold. Catherine Walsh wasn't afraid of Victoria Harrington. Catherine Walsh didn't need to hide or run. Catherine Walsh was confident in who she was and what she had built. I texted my assistant. "Set up the meeting for next Wednesday, 11 a.m. at the Foundation office. 1 hour only. And make sure Elena Patel is available to join us." If Victoria wanted to see me, she would do so on my terms, in my space, with my allies present. Whatever she had to say, I was ready to hear it. Not as Olivia Harrington, the disappointing daughter-in-law, but as Catherine Walsh, educator, foundation director, and woman in complete control of her own destiny. Wednesday arrived with unseasonable warmth, sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Catherine Walsh Foundation's downtown office. I'd chosen the space deliberately. Open, airy, with views of Millennium Park and Lake Michigan beyond, as different from the wood-paneled, tradition-bound Harrington aesthetic as possible. I dressed with care that morning, selecting a bright blue suit that Olivia Harrington would never have worn. Too bold, too confident, too far from the muted, conservative palette Victoria had always pushed me toward. Catherine Walsh dressed to please herself, not to meet someone else's arbitrary standards. Elena arrived 30 minutes before Victoria was due, her familiar smile reassuring as she gave me a quick hug. "You look good, Catherine," she said, stepping back to study me. "Chicago agrees with you." "Freedom agrees with me," I corrected with a smile. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss it." She glanced around the office, taking in the modern art on the walls, the clean lines of the furniture, the wall of awards already accumulating from Catherine Walsh's educational initiatives. "This is impressive. You've built something remarkable in just a few months." "We've built it," I reminded her. "Your research is the foundation of our grant programs." "Speaking of foundations," Elena's expression turned more serious. "Are you ready for this meeting?" "As ready as I'll ever be." I moved to the window, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. What should I expect? You know her better than I do these days. Elena joined me at the window. Humility, which I never thought I'd say about Victoria Harrington. But losing everything, the status, the influence, most of their wealth, it's changed her. The whole family, really. I was about to ask more when My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Walsh, Victoria Harrington is here for your 11 o'clock. Send her in, please, I replied, turning from the window and moving to the center of the office. The door opened, and Victoria Harrington stepped through. My first thought was that she looked older. The perfectly maintained facade had slipped, revealing the actual woman beneath. Her hair, while still stylishly cut, showed strands of natural gray she would have never permitted before. Her clothes, though quality, were simpler, less designer-focused. But most striking was her expression as she saw me, not the contempt or condescension I'd grown accustomed to, but something that looked almost like respect. Catherine, she said quietly, using my new name without hesitation. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Victoria, I nodded, gesturing toward the seating area. Please have a seat. You know Dr. Patel, of course. Yes, we've been working closely on the ethics committee. Victoria sat across from me, her posture still perfect but lacking the imperial bearing I remembered. You've created a beautiful space here. Thank you, I said, studying her carefully. You're a long way from Boston. Yes, she glanced out at the Chicago skyline. It's my first time in the city, actually. James always spoke highly of it. The reference to James hung between us, an acknowledgement of the complicated history we shared without directly addressing it. Your assistant said this is about an educational matter? I prompted, keeping my tone professional. It is. Victoria opened her purse and removed a slim folder, placing it on the coffee table between us. I'm here to propose a partnership between the Catherine Walsh Foundation and what remains of Harrington Holdings. I didn't reach for the folder, maintaining eye contact with Victoria instead. What kind of partnership? Reparations, essentially, she said, the bluntness of the statement surprising me. The Harrington family built its fortune by exploiting educators, brilliant minds like Elena's and countless others over the decades. We want to make that right. The licensing agreement is a start, she interrupted gently. But it doesn't address the historical wrongs. What I'm proposing goes beyond that. Now I did reach for the folder, opening it to find a detailed proposal for transforming Harrington Holdings into a benefit corporation, with 51% of all future profits directed toward educational initiatives. We want the Walsh Foundation to administer these funds, Victoria continued as I scanned the document. Your organization has the expertise and ethical framework we need. I looked up, meeting her gaze. Why me? There are plenty of educational foundations with longer track records. Because you understand both worlds, she said simply. The educational needs and the corporate realities. And because you, more than anyone, have earned the right to determine how Harrington resources should be used to benefit education. I glanced at Elena, who nodded slightly. It's a serious proposal, Catherine, Elena confirmed. I've reviewed the framework. It could do tremendous good. And what does James think of this plan? I asked, returning my attention to Victoria. It was his idea, she admitted, though I fully support it. I set the folder down, leaning back in my chair. The last time we spoke, you made it very clear that I was just a teacher who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of your business world. What changed? Victoria was quiet for a moment, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new quality I'd never heard from her before. Humility. Everything changed. You changed it. She met my eyes directly. You were never just anything, Catherine. I was wrong. Spectacularly, catastrophically, wrong. About you, about the value of education, about what actually matters. The admission, so unexpected from this proud woman, momentarily left me speechless. Losing everything has a way of clarifying one's perspective, she continued. When the company collapsed, when our social standing evaporated, when the name that I'd spent my life protecting suddenly became worthless, I had to face some uncomfortable truths about myself, about the legacy I thought I was preserving. She glanced around my office, taking in the evidence of what I'd built. You've accomplished more of genuine value in 6 months than the Harrington family did in 3 generations. Not because you had wealth or connections or the right last name, but because you had purpose, vision, actual expertise. Why not just donate to established educational charities? I asked, still skeptical despite her apparent sincerity. Why seek me out specifically? Because I owe you a debt, she said simply, not just for exposing the rot in our family business, though that was necessary, but for what I put you through personally. The dismissal, the exclusion, the constant reminders that you weren't real family. I was cruel to you, Catherine. Deliberately, consistently cruel. The admission hung in the air between us, an unexpected acknowledgement of 4 years of subtle and not-so-subtle psychological warfare. Yes, I agreed calmly. You were. I can't undo that, Victoria continued, but I can acknowledge it, and I can try to ensure that something positive emerges from the wreckage of our family's legacy. The proposal before you would do that. I studied her for a long moment, searching for any sign of the manipulative, status-obsessed woman who had made my life miserable for 4 years. But all I saw was someone who, like me, had been transformed by the collapse of the world she'd once inhabited. I'll need time to review this properly, I said finally, with my board, my legal team, and my sister. Victoria nodded, accepting my caution. Of course. Take whatever time you need. If we were to move forward, I said carefully, it would be strictly professional, a business arrangement between the Walsh Foundation and Harrington Holdings. Nothing personal. I understand completely. She rose to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Catherine, I am truly sorry. Not just for what I lost, but for what I tried to take from you. Your confidence, your sense of worth, your professional identity. You deserved better. The apology, unexpected and apparently genuine, momentarily caught me off guard. In all my calculations, in all my plans, I'd never anticipated Victoria Harrington capable of such self-reflection. Thank you, I said simply, rising as well. I appreciate you saying that. Elena walked Victoria to the door, the two of them confirming details about the next ethics committee meeting. I remained by the window, gazing out at the city that had become my home, processing the strange encounter. Once Victoria was gone, Elena returned to my side. Well, what do you think? I paused, considering. I think she's genuinely changed, which is something I never expected to see. Does that change how you feel about the proposal? I'll evaluate it on its merits, I said firmly. Catherine Walsh doesn't make business decisions based on personal history. Elena smiled at that. You really have become her, haven't you? Fully and completely. I am her, I corrected gently. I always was. I just lost sight of it for a while. After Elena left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching clouds drift across the Chicago sky. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being told I was just a teacher, who couldn't understand the business world, I was now in a position to determine the future of the very company that had dismissed my abilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. How did it go with the dragon lady? I smiled at her protective instinct. Surprisingly civil, I replied. She's proposing a business partnership. I'll fill you in over dinner. Professional Catherine considering a Harrington alliance? Never thought I'd see the day? Neither did I texted back. But it turns out Catherine makes decisions based on impact, not emotion. And this could do a lot of good. 3 months later, the partnership was officially announced. The press release was straightforward. The Catherine Walsh Foundation and Harrington Educational Technologies launch initiative to return corporate profits to classrooms. The accompanying photo showed me shaking hands with James, our first meeting since I'd left Boston. He looked different, humbler, less polished, somehow more authentic. We'd spoken briefly, professionally, without any reference to our shared past. "Congratulations, Catherine," he'd said as the photographers packed up their equipment. "You've built something remarkable." "So have you," I acknowledged. Transforming Harrington Holdings couldn't have been easy. Easier than continuing the lie, he admitted. The company we're building now might actually deserve to succeed. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the summer sunset over Lake Michigan, a sense of completion washing over me. The circle had closed in a way I never could have anticipated. The woman who had been deemed unworthy of inclusion in the Harrington family Christmas had ultimately determined the family's business future. Not because I'd sought revenge, though that had certainly been part of my initial motivation, but because I'd reclaimed my own value, my own expertise, my own identity. Catherine Walsh wasn't defined by her relationship to the Harringtons, or by their assessment of her worth. She was defined by her own accomplishments, her own vision, her own uncompromising standards. As the sky darkened and the city lights began to twinkle below, I raised my glass in a silent toast, not to victory or vindication, but to the journey that had brought me here, to the painful lessons that had shaped me, to the strength I hadn't known I possessed, and to the future I was now free to create on my own terms. The teacher they had dismissed had become the leader they now followed, and that, more than any revenge, was the perfect resolution to my story. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.